She'd be here waiting for him when he finally came back for her. When he was younger, he'd stayed away from Piper out of respect for his best friend, then because he'd wanted to be in a better financial position before he told Deacon how he felt about his sister. If he'd stopped waiting, moved back sooner? Jesus, he couldn't think like that. What-ifs didn't exist for him. The reality was staring back at him in the mirror. What would she think when she saw him? Would his scar disgust her? By the time he'd moved back to Miami, he'd grown the beard. She hadn't seen him without it since before the accident. He'd made sure of it. Rinsing off the blade, he brought it up and took the first swipe on the damaged side. If she cringed away from him, if what he'd hidden all these months repulsed her, it could only be a good thing. She was already 1,000,000 miles out of his reach. A few more couldn't hurt. He stared at himself, at the scar that defined who he was now. It had faded a little, no longer the angry red it had been. Starting at the corner of his eye, it carried on down to the edge of his mouth, puckering the skin, twisting his lips to one side when he said certain words, held his mouth a certain way when he smiled. Not that he'd done much of that lately. Then it dipped lower, finishing at his jaw. He barely recognized the man he saw in the mirror. Not anymore. A short time later, he was in a suit and driving a beautiful classic car covered with bright purple ribbons down Axel Alley, which added a whole new dimension of hell, not to mention unwanted attention. He already felt on display, and his stress increased as he neared Piper's cottage. The very idea of transporting the 3 women had his heart slugging erratically against his rib cage. Jesus, he needed to pull it together, or he was a damned panic attack waiting to happen. He hadn't had one in months, and he wanted to keep it that way. He hated this feeling that he was losing control. He should have been honest, told Deke he couldn't do it, but the guy already worried enough over his state of mind. The last thing he wanted to do was admit just how fucked up he still was. You can do this. You have to do this. The road was quiet, which wasn't a surprise since it was Saturday afternoon. Other than the cottage Piper and Rusty lived in, well, just Piper now since Rusty had recently shacked up with her new man, there was nothing but businesses on Axel Alley. Businesses that catered to anything with an engine, and home to the girls' classic car restoration business. After Deacon's father died, Rusty, Piper, and their best friend Alex took over the business, and they were doing a fucking fantastic job. Being the only residential property on this stretch of road, the cottage wasn't hard to miss. It also looked like something from a fairy tale with its lemon and mauve paint and quaint little veranda. Piper suited the place perfectly. Her pink Corvette was parked outside, curvy and sexy, with a whole lot of cute. A description that also fit its owner. He pulled up behind it and shut off the engine. Gripping the wheel, he let his head drop back and closed his eyes. Breathe. He automatically started the breathing exercises his shrink taught him. In through your nose, out through your mouth. His pulse slowed, and the tremor in his hands eased. He could do this. Mind made up, he climbed out and limped up the path, taking the stairs to the front door. Resisting the urge to swipe his sweaty palms down the front of his trousers, he knocked. Footsteps sounded behind the door seconds before it swung open. Rusty stood there, smiling up at him, green eyes sparkling. Rusty was Deacon and Piper's sister, the Middle West, and the woman was currently taking him in from head to toe. Her eyes widened when they landed on his face, but she didn't shrink back. Instead, she whistled long and low. Whoa, you look like some kind of badass assassin in that suit. Nice. Jesus. Heat climbed up his neck at Rusty's continued scrutiny. So, she said, grinning at him and waggling her eyebrows. Do you have a concealed weapon hidden under there? I bet it's big, right? He choked out a laugh, surprised by the rough sound.